Hi, I'm Landon Johnson. I'm with AwardsWatch. How are you guys doing today?
We're good.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. I mean, the film is just so incredible. I saw it last year at Netflix, and I was just completely blown away by what you guys were able to create. I mean, World War One sounds, right? I mean, there's not a lot of like recordings from, World War One. So I really want to ask you, I guess this will go to Frank first. How did you tackle this without having authentic World War One sounds?
So, you're right. There are actually hardly any sonic recordings of that time. So, if you talk about reference, you could almost say that there is none really in terms of actual audio recordings. But what we came across were um, letters that soldiers had written to their loved ones at home, where they kind of describe what they heard being on the front line. And they even created nicknames for certain ammunition. And we kind of took that as an inspiration um, for the sound design. And then it's kind of hard to, if you want to be 100% historical accurate, that it doesn't really work with World War One. It's easier with World War Two, but for us in this film, the goal was really to create an emotional reality that would be more important than the actual technical or scientific reality.
Oh, and it was, I mean, the soundscape is just impeccable. I mean, when you watch it in a theater, I wish it had a longer run in the theater. I tell everyone you have to see this in the theater because it's just such an experience. I mean, you really feel that. And Volker, the score is just, I mean, it's harrowing and it's just so incredible. I kind of wonder how much, I know you've worked with Edward Berger before. How much insight I think this is your fourth film with him. How much insight did you have from Edward about the score?
Well, Edward is in the sense fantastic because he's not giving you a lot of things to work with, which sometimes I'm a person that can live with that very well because I'm my in a way my fantasy and my creation starts already once I've seen the film. I'm already in it in a way, and I'm trying to come up with thoughts that might be historical, that might be not historical. In a lot of ways, I think the music has a big chance of being much more modern in the sense that it brings, a connection to the here and now. So in this case, Edward said just after the first screening, he just said four sentences to me. One was, I want to have you destroy the pictures. That was the one. Second one was, I want to have a music for Paul Bäumer's stomach, which is the main protagonist. So he wanted to have something that his stomach feeling, that he's when he's in the trenches or when he, I mean, we were talking about a young man of 17 years, getting dehumanized in a very quick process and just, longing for some light in a way. And then the third one was, I want to have a snare drum blade that is played by someone who can't play the snare. So he wanted to have something broken or arrhythmical, which I think was the hardest for me. It took me the longest actually just to get these snare drums in the right shape, because I think what Marcus said and what I in my how I'm working, it is very similar. Sometimes what you want to achieve is not always what you use as a sound. So you want to have a snare drum sound that sounds military, but at the same time you want to have it being broken. So you don't take a snare and you just cut it off and then you play on it. You actually layer sounds of snares in different sizes on top of each other. And the fourth thing that Edward said to me, I want to have something from you that you've never done before. So here I went with those four things, and I drove back home, and I actually started the next day with the very first piece that is called Remains, which has these these three notes, and I played them on a harmonium, and I recorded that on the next day, and I sent it to Edward, and he was very happy about it.
Oh, it's so incredible. And I'm glad you brought up Paul, because there's this one scene, when he kills the French soldier, and you kind of see him reflect on that, as a human, like what he's done. And it's kind of like an internal breakdown. Can you tell me a little bit about the soundscape around that scene? Because it was just so impactful. And I think the sound really elevates it in a way that it makes it incredibly emotional.
Mm-hmm. Well, the kind of situation we come from is that Paul jumps into this crater, and the battle is really at its peak, and there's so much activity around him, and then they have this little duel, and then slowly all the battle activity kind of fades away, which makes sense because the battle is kind of moving on geographically, but also it was important to focus on just the two of them. So over time, at some point, the score comes in, and then when the Frenchman died, actually, the score stops again. Then we are very, very alone, more or less, with only Paul. And for me, that always had like a very symbolic meaning. Even though you're a soldier and you're fighting along with hundreds or 1,000 other soldiers, it's like in the most desperate moments, you're left on your own, and he really has to digest and deal with what he has just experienced. He just has killed a father and a husband, and you can see him struggling. And for me, it was always very strong because he's just alone in that moment, and he has to deal with it. And I think sound-wise, the key here was really to reduce elements to the absolute minimum, and then just stay with the brilliant performance actually of Felix.
Which was the same with the music, I have to say, because the music, in a way, once Paul Bäumer is actually holding his hands to his ears, the music is in a way a full orchestrated piece, but I just cut it all the frequency of above a certain K, so all the high end is completely away, so you just hear it very muffled. And Edward was always, and sometimes I send him a little more high frequency, and he said, it's too much emotion, it's actually too strong, let's reduce it. So the music is in a way appearing like you hear it like it's under a carpet, and when you lift the carpet, it would come out like very wildly. As well as the music also describes, I think, a little bit the last breath of the French soldier, because there's like these very little subtle strings that are in a way, explaining with the breath itself. They are explaining the last moments as a disappearance out of life. And I think that works in that scene extremely well, the transition from the very high volume battlefield into this crater.
And that's just a testament to your artistry. And, that's so amazing about the snare drum and being able to learn that and how you incorporated that. Now, Volker, tell me about the refurbished harmonium that was passed down from your grandmother and how you incorporated that into the score.
Yeah, it was actually it was actually standing in the house of my grandmother. Then it went to other places, and then I received it back a few years ago, and it was pretty broken. So I went, in my area where I'm living, there is a guy, one of the few guys that is able to refurbish a harmonium, because it's quite complicated, even though the technology is very simple, but to actually make it work and tune it in a proper tuning, it's not so easy. So he took the harmonium to his house, and then he was sending me pictures of, so I took that, I took all things out, and then he showed me, a little bit like you're looking in a car garage where you see all the pieces lying. And it was finished like half a year before I started the score, and it was sitting there. So when I came back home, I had the feeling, after seeing the film the first time, I had the feeling that this instrument, even though I was not aware of what it can do, it is so nice that it's connected to that time, because in my village, it was standing around 1900 in a home where it was accompanying Christian, Bach chorals, as a, where people were singing along with that instrument. And now it came to me, and for me, it was always, as a kid, it was an instrument of old people. Every old person that I knew at that time had this kind of organ replacement in their homes. And now it was becoming suddenly an instrument where I could work with, that nearly sounds like a modular synthesizer when you actually boost it and you put it through a distortion. And I'm very happy that I was, that I actually had it there, that I was able to play it and to have that connection, which is not always happening.
Oh no, and just to break that down to a granular level, on just to highlight the technical achievement, you put microphones in the harmonium, correct?
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Tiny microphones.
Yes, I actually mic. Normally, what you do is you mic it up from the outside and you let it, you play it, but then you, in the post work, you actually take all the cracklings and all the things that are, not really harmonium. You take it all out, and you clean it, and then maybe you even play a new take because, oh, I heard a noise under your foot or things like that, So what I did exactly the other thing. I just put the microphones inside, and I had the chance to amplify, for example, in the very last piece that is called Paul, when we just, in a way, witnessing the death of Paul, and well, he's sitting already in the trenches, and we just go over the woods, and it's a little bit like a piece that explains that there is also hope, that we might be able to learn from all what we experienced now. That shows the whole inner world of a harmonium, because you hear all the knocks and the, even when I leave the keys, I boosted the bass of that. So when you just drop the keys, it's nearly like a bass drum, because it amplifies certain frequencies. So I put all these little things inside, and I recorded every track with 8 microphones.
Oh, that's just so incredible. Just so incredible. And Volker, I know that maybe a little bit of Led Zeppelin influenced the score.
Well, it was actually Edward came up with that, because he was, normally when you work on a piece, when we work on a film, normally you work for, I would say I would mainly work for a week or two to collect ideas. And then I'm very shy with those ideas. So I want to be 100% sure that these ideas are, when I send them, that they are dropping in a way that, Edward is saying, hey, fantastic, idea 3, idea 5, idea 9 is fantastic. In this case, I was so overwhelmed, by listening to it, because I had the feeling this is exactly the piece that I want to write for it, and I said to myself, I have to send that first to Edward, because if he says no, I'm smashed in a way. I have to go back, in my little dungeon and just search for another idea that might be not as good in my taste. So but then the next day he called me, and he was, I think, in his living room with his wife, and they were cheering in a way through the phone, and they were saying, and Edward said, Volker, it really sounds like Led Zeppelin. And I was like, okay, that's a complete positive reaction, because of course the music of Led Zeppelin has a very raving and very raw energy, which I mean, I made so much music where I stage dive to. I totally know what it is, you know.
It's so incredible. And it's really great how you use so many elements, you know, the refurbished harmonium, and, you know, that it turns out to be Led Zeppelin. That's just, it just shows you like all the components that created this, you know, all the granular elements that created this magnificent sound and score. And so that's just, again, just a testament to your artistry and how amazing it is. And I also kind of want to know, where did you find the happy medium between all the explosions and the guns and the sound effects happening in the battle, and then the score? Because it just seems like it's perfectly in cadence.
Well, I mean, you know, while the sound, I mean, in this case, the sound had a lot of, I think they worked fantastically in, you know, changing the atmosphere and also using perspectives in a way. But you always have the challenge of being connected with what you see. With the music, you are disconnected from that. You can actually, I mean, you can, I think with the sound, you can do that as well, I guess. But I think it's much more difficult to keep the balance. In music, you can maybe be a creature outside of everything, but you add something to it that is in a way like color, in a way, you know? So what I tried in certain places is to lighten up the illusion of that this might be something where heaven, let's say where the doors to heaven are opening up and you see a little bit of light coming through. And I can imagine when you're always in darkness, that the wish of, you know, finding home. I mean, these soldiers were like in the film, they are searching for, there's the scarf that is traveling from one soldier to the other. They are longing for pictures of women just because they are, you know, they just stand in front of them and they feel like, let's talk to them in a way. Then they see the women appearing at the horizon in a way, as like a Fata Morgana in a way. And one has the courage to make it into a real experience. So my feeling was that this needs a melody that can come through. And maybe one significant scene was when the light bulb is flying over, very in the early parts of the film, over the battlefields. It was for me a little bit like a New Year's Eve feeling. I was thinking, let's give them music that is celebrating in a way the hope. But then when it's dropping and suddenly you see the shadows of the battlefield, it becomes like I've fooled them in a way with the music. And that as an audience, I think that is very important, that you feel in a way that you feel like, oh, that's exactly not what it is. It's not the paradise. It's actually totally the opposite. So I think that is how I was trying to, you know, play a little bit with these elements.
Oh, just incredible. And now, Frank, what would you say the biggest challenge was for you in tackling the soundscape?
Oh, there were so many challenges, actually. I mean, for sure, creating those battle scenes, there was a huge challenge. It probably ate up 75% of the whole editing time, just because the sheer amount of elements that needed to be created, arranged. We needed to find a rhythm. Lots of elements from the battle are actually happening off screen, you know, because the camera is focusing on Paul so much for good reason. But then we still needed to tell what's going on in the battle through sound, basically. So finding the right rhythm for all these elements was quite a bit of a challenge, especially also, you know, in the long battle in the middle of the film, there's a constant change with regards to who is having the upper hand. is it the French, is it the Germans? It kind of goes back and forth, and we needed to mirror that aspect in the sound somehow. But the way the film is cut, like focusing on Paul so much, a lot of that had to be told through sound, and yeah, that was probably a bit of a challenge. But there were, other challenges too, like the shift between when do we turn into the subjective sonic angle, like when would we hear things through Paul's ears, and when we go back to a kind of an objective sonic angle. We had a lot of play with which sounds would we hear at what time, and in which way. Would they be real? Would they be treated? Yeah, that was a bit of a long road, but
Wow.
Good road.
But it paid off. I mean, you can really feel the energy that went into this. And I love that you identified the objective and the subjective, what Paul sees, what Paul hears, his perspective, and then what the entire war does, just being there is the background of it, because you kind of have to find that balance of the emotion of Paul, and then kind of where his emotion is, maybe blocking things out, or hearing things more intensely, or feeling it differently. So that's just, again, just a testament to your artistry. And I think that's so incredible. Volker, how about you? What was your biggest challenge in creating this beautiful score?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge, I think, which is maybe a challenge in every film, but in this film, it was even a bigger challenge, was to find the balance between not overpowering the film in a way. And the more I'm trying to find a sense of, how I can, have significant elements that are meaningful in a way. But at the same time, like, let's say I have a piece of music that is appearing in a meaningful way. But at the same time, I don't want to overpower the acting, and I don't want to bring any heroic feeling to the score.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, this was incredible, guys. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you at the Oscars. And thank you so much for making this film and taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Landon.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.